Hey everyone, welcome back to the Daily Gold Podcast. I'm here speaking with Jeb Hanwerger, my buddy from goldstocktrades.com. Today we have a special guest. We have a new guest. His name is George Salamis, and he's the president and CEO of a new company called Edgewater Exploration. And Edgewater has properties in Ghana and Spain. George is here to tell us about that. George, as we get started here, can you just inform our listeners about how Edgewater was put together, how it got started, and some of those details?
Yeah, sure can. And good afternoon to you guys. Thanks for taking the interview. Basically, Edgewater is a new company, as you mentioned earlier. We've been in existence for a little over a year now. A year and a half ago, this company was very clearly a shell company with no assets, but with a very sort of large and prominent roster of shareholders. And if one was to pull that roster of shareholders out and put it on the table, one would quite quickly see that it's sort of reads as the who's who of the mining business. The top chairmen and CEOs of some very, very large mining companies have put their own skin into the company, and that was a great basis for us to start off a company in terms of getting assets, getting recognition, getting off the ground. We have since, over the last year and a half, put two assets into the company, as you mentioned, one in Spain and one in Ghana.
Okay, hey George, this is Jeb from Gold Stock Trades, and thanks for being with us today. I'm really interested in the Corcoesto advanced stage gold deposit in Spain. Could you tell us a little bit more? I know that you're at the stage now where you may be releasing a scoping study.
That is correct, Jeb. We are sort of on the cusp of putting out a release with respect to the scoping study, or what's called in 43101 lingo a PEA, a preliminary economic assessment. And what that's going to show is what we believe to be phenomenal value. If you roll the clock backwards a year and a half ago when we acquired this deposit from Lundin Mining for $8 million. Roughly speaking, there was just over 300,000 ounces of gold in the ground identified, and in a very short period of time, and through a very concerted effort to drill off some extensions of what was known then, we've taken the deposit to 1.5 million ounces. Most of that is inferred category, but we've certainly grown the deposit sort of easily fourfold, and that was a real win for our shareholders. And then the next step, when we passed the 1 million ounce mark, which we announced, I guess it was in June of this past year, we felt that, okay, there's now enough of a resource base to justify bringing some independent engineers in to look at this as a potential development scenario. Passing that 1 million ounce mark was huge for us. And thus we commissioned an engineering group to look at this deposit from an open pit and underground mining perspective, and the results thereof you'll see very shortly.
Okay, George, now let's talk about your other project, the Enchi Gold Project in Ghana. You guys have done a significant amount of drilling there. Can you just tell us how you acquired this project, and also what kind of news or catalysts we can expect there in the near term?
Yeah, sure. We acquired this deposit from Redback Mining, and some of your listeners will recall Redback was a huge score in terms of an M&A transaction which took place about a year and a half ago. Again, this time it was Kinross Mining, the very large mining company, taking over Redback at a pretty significant premium. Redback got their start in Ghana, and got their start really at the Chirano mine, which started off as a small gold deposit and grew into a very large one. And Redback had a very large piece of exploration ground south of their Chirano mine, which they'd done a fair bit of exploration on, but never put together a resource estimate on. They did about 40,000 meters of drilling in the past, on a very wide space basis in a very shallow manner. So when we inherited, or when we signed the joint venture earn-in agreement with Redback back in the day, we were given a database which had about 40,000 meters of drilling spread out over a huge area. And the density of drilling work, if you will, was not enough for anybody to put together a valid resource estimate at the time. But so what we've been doing over the past year, over 20,000 meters of drilling, is basically drilling in between sections that had not been drilled previously by Redback, now Kinross. in an effort to start stringing these zones together to basically connect the dots, if you will, on a resource estimate. And so the deposit or the project per se has never had an official resource estimate done on it, and we expect to come out with one, or the very first maiden resource on the project in the first quarter of next year.
George, why is this a good time now for investors to take a good look at Edgewater Exploration?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and basically my experience in the past with companies like Edgewater, and I've done this before, started companies up, built them up, taken unwanted and unloved assets and grown them and de-risked them, if you will, and then sold them off or built them or turned them into producing assets. Basically, there's a sweet spot in this junior resource game, which is take a small asset, grow it big by way of exploration, de-risk it the best you can, take it as far as you can up the curve, do a study on it, in this case a scoping study, which is what's going to come out shortly in Corcoesto. Once you have that, you have a stamp of value. You have an engineering report that says, basically, if you do all these things to this deposit, this is the value that's imputed to this deposit. And that's where the biggest valuation leap is, in my experience. When you go from an unloved resource to something where you can put an actual value on that. And typically what happens is the market capitalizations of these companies accrete over time closer and closer as you further de-risk these deposits to that net present value that's derived out of these studies. So this is sort of the sweet spot, the good time for investors to get in.
Can you tell us, before we conclude, can you tell us about the mining in Spain, and what sort of, is it a mining-friendly jurisdiction?
Yeah, I mean, few people know this fact, but there have been, in fact, 10 mining operations which have been permitted in Spain in the last 10 years. So, the government has shown itself to be pro-mining. Obviously, one has to mine responsibly in Spain. So that's certainly a positive factor. The economic condition of Spain right now, and this is Greece, this is Italy, this is most of the EU, is such that these countries need jobs. They need economic engines to drive their respective economies, and they need mining. And in fact, in the province of Galicia, where this deposit is in the northwestern part of Spain, we hold dialogue, or we hold court with what I call the Holy Trinity. That's the mayor and the municipality, the mines minister, and the environment minister. And the feedback we get from all three of these groups, who are responsible for permitting, giving us the permit, they're all extremely positive. They're all extremely on side and have told us, basically, you guys conform to the EU norms, rules, and regulations with respect to mine operation, and we'll see to it that you guys will get this permit. And nobody's come out against it thus far.
Now, George, as we close, is there anything else you want to mention that we didn't cover?
Yeah, again, with respect to value creation over time, I think we've proven to our shareholders that we can take small assets and turn them into larger ones. I think we've proven to our shareholders that we can move very quickly on the ground in places like Africa, and do a lot of drilling and put together a resource very quickly in Africa, which will be coming out next year. And this is a company that a year from now we'll have a very large portfolio of ounces both in Spain and in Ghana.
Okay, George. Well, thanks so much for taking the time today and informing us and our listeners about Edgewater Exploration. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure.